Everything smells delicious. Thanks for organizing this.
Glad y'all could make it. The weather held out nicely.
Yeah.
The neighborhood really appreciates this chance to get together.
Get him out of here right now!
Ma'am, you need to calm down or we will arrest you too.
You ever get that feeling that something small, something almost insignificant, is about to turn into something much bigger? Not all at once, not in a dramatic explosion, but slowly, quietly, piece by piece. At first, it doesn't seem like anything serious. Just a letter, a complaint, a warning, something you can ignore, something you can brush off. But then, it happens again, and again, and again, until one day, you stop and realize, this isn't random. This isn't coincidence. This is targeted. And that realization, it changes everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's exactly how it started for me. I had been living in that neighborhood for years. Not months. Not weeks. Years. It was the kind of place people move to when they want peace. Quiet streets. Clean sidewalks. Friendly neighbors who wave as they pass by. Nothing ever really happened there. No drama. No conflict. No problems. At least, that's what I believed. My daily routine was simple, predictable, comfortable. Wake up early. Have coffee on the porch. Watch the sunlight slowly fill the street. Go about my day. Come back home. Enjoy the silence. It was peaceful. And in a world that moves too fast, that kind of peace is rare. But peace doesn't always last. And sometimes, the people you expect to maintain that peace are the very ones who destroy it. Because everything changed the moment the HOA decided to take a special interest in me at first. It was so small, I almost ignored it completely. A notice, taped neatly to my door. It said my lawn was too long. Half an inch. Half an inch. I remember standing there, reading it twice, just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Half an inch. I actually laughed. Not out of frustration, but because it felt ridiculous. So I handled it. Right away. Got the mower out. Trimmed the lawn. Made sure everything looked perfect. Problem solved. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because a few days later, another notice showed up. This time, it wasn't the lawn. It was my driveway. Apparently, there was a violation regarding how my car was parked. Too close to the edge. Too visible. Too something. It wasn't even clear. But again, I didn't argue. Didn't complain. I adjusted. Moved the car. Followed the instruction. Handled it. But then, another notice came. And this time, it felt different. Not because of what it said, but because of how it said it. It mentioned my mailbox. The color. The condition. The non-compliance. Now I started paying attention. Because this wasn't normal anymore. One notice? Fine. Two notices? Maybe coincidence. But three? That's a pattern. And patterns mean intention. Still, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were just doing their job. Maybe they were being strict with everyone. Maybe it wasn't just me. But that idea didn't last long. Because I started looking around. Really looking. Walking through the neighborhood. Observing details. And what I saw didn't match what I was experiencing. Other lawns. Longer than mine. Other driveways. Messier. Other houses. Clearly not following the same rules. But no notices. No warnings. No fines. Just me. And that's when the question finally hit me. Why me? What did I do to deserve this level of attention? Was it random? Personal? Intentional? I didn't have the answer yet. But I knew one thing. I needed to find out. So I decided to attend an HOA meeting. Not to argue. Not to create conflict. Just to understand. I went in calm. Collected. Respectful. I wasn't there to fight. I was there to talk. But the moment I stepped into that room, something felt off. You know that feeling. When you walk into a place, and the energy just feels wrong? That was it. People weren't welcoming. They weren't open. They weren't interested in conversation. They were guarded. Defensive. Almost annoyed that I was there. Still, I stayed calm. Waited for my turn. Spoke clearly. Respectfully. Asked simple questions. Can you explain the violations? Can you show me where I'm not in compliance? Can we go through this together? Basic questions. Reasonable questions. But instead of answers, I got resistance. Silence. Short responses. Dismissive looks. And then, attitude. Every question I asked was treated like a problem. Not something to be solved, but something to be shut down. And then it happened. One of the board members leaned back in their chair, looked straight at me, and said something I will never forget. If you don't cooperate, we'll handle it our way. Now that sentence, it stayed with me, because it didn't sound official, didn't sound professional. It sounded personal. It sounded like a warning. No, not even a warning, a threat. And from that moment on, everything changed. Because now I knew. This wasn't about rules anymore. This wasn't about community standards. This was about control. And I had just become the target. After that meeting, things escalated. Fast. The letters became more frequent. The language became harsher. The fines? Higher. What used to be polite reminders turned into aggressive demands. What used to be notices turned into threats. It was no longer about fixing anything. It was about pressure. Constant. Relentless. Pressure. And then one evening, everything reached a new level. I came home like any other day, parked the car, walked up to my door, and that's when I saw it. A paper, taped right in the center. Bright. Bold. Impossible to ignore. I stopped, before even reading it, because something about it felt different, heavier. And when I finally looked at it, that feeling was confirmed. Final warning, legal action pending. No explanation, no breakdown, no details, just pressure, just intimidation. I stood there for a long moment, reading it again and again, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out what exactly they thought I had done. But deep down, I already knew the answer. This wasn't about violations. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. And they weren't trying to correct me anymore. They were trying to break me. And as I stood there, holding that paper in my hand, one thought became very clear. This wasn't over. Not even close. In fact, it felt like something bigger was coming next. Something I wasn't supposed to expect. Something they thought I wouldn't question. And at that moment, I had no idea just how far they were willing to go. 2 days later, everything escalated. And I mean instantly. Not gradually. Not subtly. Instantly. Like whatever line existed before had just been crossed. It was late afternoon. The kind of afternoon that feels completely normal. Quiet. Still. Predictable. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of place. Just another day. The sun was starting to lower, casting long shadows across the street. Neighbors were inside. Doors closed. Curtains drawn. Everything felt calm. Too calm. And then I heard it. A knock at the door. Not just any knock. Loud. Sharp. Demanding. The kind of knock that doesn't ask for attention. It takes it. It echoed through the house. Once. Then again. Stronger the second time. And immediately, something felt wrong. Because normal visitors don't knock like that. Friends don't knock like that. Delivery drivers don't knock like that. This kind of knock comes with authority. Or at least, an attempt at it. I stood still for a moment. Listening. Waiting. The silence after the knock felt heavier than the sound itself. And then it came again. Even louder. Even more aggressive. That was enough. I started walking toward the door. Slowly. Not rushed. Not panicked. Just aware. Every step measured. Every movement controlled. Because something inside me was already telling me this wasn't normal. And when I reached the door, I paused. Just for a second. Hand near the handle. Listening again. No voices. No movement. Just presence. And then, I opened it. And that's when I saw them. 2 men. Standing there. Wearing police uniforms. At first glance, everything looked real. The badges. The patches. The belts. The stance. Even the way they positioned themselves. One slightly forward. One slightly back. Like they had done this before. Like they knew exactly how to look. One of them spoke. "Sir, we're here regarding a complaint. We need you to come with us." Calm voice. Controlled tone. But something about it didn't land right. Now most people, in that moment, wouldn't think twice. They'd panic. They'd comply. They'd assume everything is legitimate. Because that's what authority does. It creates pressure. Instant pressure. But me? I didn't move. Didn't react. Because something didn't sit right. Not immediately. Not obviously. But quietly. Deep in the details. It started with small things. The kind of details most people would never notice. The stitching on the uniform. Slightly off. Not wrong enough to stand out. But not right enough to ignore. The badge placement. Close. But not exact. The material. The texture. The fit. Something about it felt inconsistent. And then I looked at their posture again. Too stiff. Too deliberate. Like they were trying to act natural. Instead of being natural. And then came the biggest sign. Their presence. Real officers. carry a certain energy, confidence, control, experience. It's not something you can fake easily. And these two, they were trying. Hard. But trying is not the same as being. And that's when I knew something wasn't right. So I did the simplest thing possible. I asked a question. Which department are you with? There was a pause. Just a fraction of a second. But it was there. And that pause told me more than any answer could. Then came the response. Short, vague, unconvincing. No detail. No clarity. Just enough to sound like an answer. But not enough to be one. So I asked another question. Can I see your badge numbers? Another pause. Longer this time. A quick glance between them. And then, another weak response. No direct answer. No proper presentation. Just avoidance. And now, the cracks were starting to show. But I wasn't done. Where's the official report? That question changed everything. Because now, they had nowhere to go. No script to follow. No easy way out. And that's when it happened. The moment. Everything started to fall apart. They hesitated. Shifted their weight. Avoided eye contact. One of them adjusted his stance. The other looked slightly to the side. And in that moment, the entire illusion broke. Because real officers don't hesitate like that. Real officers don't struggle with basic questions. Real officers don't avoid clarity. And that's when it became clear. Completely clear. These weren't real officers. This was staged. Planned. Orchestrated. And there was only one group. Desperate enough. And bold enough. To try something like this. The HOA. They had crossed the line. Not just legally. But morally. This wasn't enforcement anymore. This was intimidation. Calculated. Deliberate. And dangerous. But here's what they didn't think about. The one thing they overlooked. The one detail. That changed everything. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They thought I was just another homeowner. Another name on a list. Another person they could pressure. Control. Silence. But they were wrong. Very wrong. So instead of reacting emotionally, instead of arguing, instead of escalating, I stayed calm. Completely calm. Because in moments like this, calm is power. And panic? Panic is exactly what they were expecting. But I didn't give it to them. Instead, I looked straight at them. Focused. Steady. Unshaken. And I said something simple. Something quiet. But something that changed everything. Do you even know who you're talking to? And just like that, they froze. Not dramatically. Not obviously, but enough. Enough to confirm everything. That hesitation. That uncertainty. That brief moment. Where their confidence disappeared. It told me everything I needed to know. They weren't in control anymore. They just didn't realize it yet. And that's when I reached for my identification. Slowly. Deliberately. Because what came next was about to change everything. I didn't rush. I didn't react. I didn't let the moment control me. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't change my tone. Didn't show even a hint of pressure. Because moments like this, they're not about speed. They're about control. And I had it. So slowly, calmly, deliberately, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my identification. No sudden movements. No dramatic gestures. Just a simple action. And then, I held it up. Right in front of them. Clear. Visible. Unmistakable. And the moment they saw it, everything changed. Not gradually. Not subtly. Instantly. Their expressions dropped. You could actually see it. That shift. That moment where reality hits harder than expectation. Confidence. Gone. Authority. Gone. Control. Gone. Replaced by something else entirely. Confusion. Shock. And then, panic. Because right there, in that exact moment, standing in front of them, was the one truth they never expected to face. I wasn't just a homeowner. I wasn't just another name on a list. I wasn't someone they could pressure, or intimidate, or manipulate. I was the chief of police. And suddenly, everything they thought they had slipped away. The situation flipped. Completely. The same two individuals who had walked up to my door with forced authority and rehearsed confidence were now standing there, frozen, exposed. Their posture changed. Their tone disappeared. Their presence collapsed. One of them tried to speak. You could see it. The hesitation. The uncertainty. The realization. Words came out, but they didn't land. We were just doing a job. A weak explanation. A desperate attempt. But there was nothing behind it. No logic. No justification. No defense. Because some actions don't have explanations. And this was one of them. Impersonating a police officer is not a misunderstanding. It's not confusion. It's not miscommunication. It's a crime. A serious one. And in that moment, they knew it. Not because I told them, but because they could feel it. The shift. The reality. The consequences. So I didn't argue. Didn't lecture. Didn't escalate. I simply did what needed to be done. I made the call. Calm. Clear. Direct. And then, we waited. The silence that followed was different. Not tense. Not uncertain. Controlled. Because now, the situation was no longer in their hands. It never really was. And within minutes, you could hear it. Distant at first, then closer. The sound of real sirens. Not staged. Not fake. Real. And when the vehicles arrived, the difference was immediate. Everything about it was different. The way they stepped out of the car. The way they carried themselves. The way they approached the situation. Professional. Controlled. Precise. No hesitation. No confusion. Just clarity. They assessed the scene quickly. Took in the details. Observed the behavior. Noticed everything. Because that's what real training looks like. Statements were taken. Questions were asked. Identification was checked. And as that process unfolded, something became very clear. The two individuals, who had shown up pretending to have authority, no longer had any. They weren't in control. They weren't even part of the process anymore. They were now the subject of it. Suspects. And as the investigation began, the truth started to come out. Piece by piece. Detail by detail. And what it revealed was worse than expected. This wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was planned. Carefully. Deliberately. The HOA had arranged everything. They had contacted individuals, given instructions, created a scenario, all with one goal: to intimidate me, to pressure me, to force compliance. But what they didn't realize was that their plan was built on the wrong assumption. They assumed I wouldn't question it. They assumed I would panic. They assumed I would comply. But instead, they exposed themselves completely. And once the truth was out, there was no putting it back. Charges were filed. Serious ones. Not just against the individuals who showed up at my door, but against the people behind it. The ones who planned it, approved it, ordered it. Because responsibility doesn't stop at action. It extends to intention. And this was intentional. Legal consequences followed. Investigations expanded. And suddenly, the same group that tried to control everything had lost all control. After that day, everything changed. Completely. The letters stopped. No more notices. No more warnings. No more fines. The pressure disappeared. The threats vanished. Silence. Total silence. But something else happened too. Something they didn't expect. People started talking. Neighbors. Residents. Families. Coming forward. Sharing their stories. Stories of pressure. Stories of intimidation. Stories of being targeted. Things that had been hidden, ignored, overlooked, were now being revealed. Because once one person speaks, others find the courage to do the same. And what became clear was something much bigger. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't one situation. This wasn't isolated. It was a pattern, a system, and it had been happening for longer than anyone realized. But it stopped. Because someone stood up. Because someone didn't comply. Because someone asked questions. And in this case, that someone was me. And in the end, there was one lesson, one truth, that stood above everything else. Some people think power comes from control, from authority, from pressure, from fear. They believe if they push hard enough, people will break. But real power? It doesn't come from fear. It comes from truth. And the moment the truth comes out, everything built on lies falls apart completely. Because no matter how strong something looks, if it's built on the wrong foundation, it won't last. And that's exactly what happened. Everything they built collapsed. Not slowly, but all at once. Because they made one mistake. One critical mistake. They thought they were above the law. And they chose the wrong person to test. Bell outro voiceover. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. Because sometimes, the most unbelievable stories aren't fiction. They're real. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment to change everything.